When the pandemic came around, as a public speaker, my income went from whatever it was to zero. My calendar was completely wiped clean, and I thought, well, okay, now what? We've all had many of those now what moments. So that's really a time for me to engage in this reset practice. So I stepped back so that I could get perspective and look at the different options and getting perspective. That's sort of the number 2 step. And then number 3 is, okay, let's realign around the next best step. So not getting too overwhelmed with 10 steps ahead. Especially at the time of the pandemic, we didn't know how long it was going to be. So sometimes we get so caught up in the future that realignment was just around the best next step.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Flow Over Fear podcast, where it is our mission to help you to rise above fear and realize your ultimate potential in leadership and life. I'm your host, Adam Hill, and it is my goal to share with you the human side of high performance. My guests share their experience with fear, anxiety, struggle, challenge, and most importantly, despite all of it, how they rose above it to achieve incredible results. So, if you're ready to rise up, let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to Flow Over Fear. Thank you so much for being here again today. And my guest today is another person that I've met through heroic public speaking. It's been such a great experience, by the way, because I've just met so many rock stars, and Penny Zenker is one of them. She is the Focusologist, an international speaker, business strategy coach, and best-selling author. Before her 31st birthday, Penny founded, developed, and sold her first multi-million-dollar business. That implies that she had multi-million-dollar businesses, by the way. And she did that while she was living in Zurich, Switzerland. And later, at the world's 4th largest market research company, she managed business unit turnarounds and was a Tony Robbins business coach, helping entrepreneurs around the world to double their businesses. Penny is one of America's leading experts in the psychology of productivity to eliminate distraction, perfectionism, and self-sabotage to maximize results in every area of your life. Penny's book, The Productivity Zone, was an instant Amazon bestseller, and her TEDx talk, The Energy of Thought, has gained attention around the world with over 1 million views. That is an incredible accomplishment. And her engaging, inspiring, interactive talks teach people to think and act more strategically. She's been featured in NBC News, Forbes, Inc., and ESPN, and Wharton Business Radio, among many others. Penny, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Adam, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I mean, your journey has spanned so much, and I mean, there's so much achievement there, and I love your story arc. Out, you went from building a business when you were really young to selling it, to being a high-powered CEO, to being a Tony Robbins coach, to now helping people to really focus, and so clearly you've had a lot of lessons learned in those experiences. So can you tell me a little bit about how it all started for Penny? Where did you come up? Where did you come from? What was the origin story?
The origin story. Well, it's there have been a lot of hard knocks and a lot of lessons that we've all had, and I think the origin story really starts with when I was in college. I went to Drexel University. Go Drexel. And it started because during my sophomore year, my father died in an accident when my parents were on vacation. And, as any major life event, it totally shook things up. And it was a time where it was just completely out of control. Mm-hmm. And I think the lessons that I learned started really there. I mean, maybe they went younger, but to me, it feels like that was because I gained some practices and some habits and some ways of looking at things at that time that helped me to sort of gain control, or at least feel in control at a time when my life was totally out of control. Yeah. And so it made me a little bit better able to deal with uncertainty and challenge. And I think when it comes earlier in life, it makes it easier to adapt into our life. And actually it's the reason that I went to Europe, and that I ended up living there for 16 years.
Wow.
Was because I felt like I had to live my life now. Like, life is now. And what did I really want to feel and achieve and accomplish during the time that I'm here, knowing that we don't know how much time that we're here.
Right, right. So you had so your experience with your father passing away at an early age, and an early age for you, kind of gave you a perspective on life that told you that we need to live it now. And you mentioned you had some tools that you'd learned there to maybe cope or deal with that. Can you kind of share some of those with us?
Yeah. So what's interesting is it took me up until the pandemic to be able to get a very simple language and clarity around it. You know how, like, looking in hindsight, right? You can look back. I think Steve Jobs told a talk about how the puzzle pieces fit together over the years, and you don't really know it until you look back and see it. Yeah. So I call those moments, big and small, that help us to realign with what matters most. I call them reset moments. Mm-hmm. And so part of what helped me in that time was making more reset moments, taking more timeouts and more check-ins with myself to ground myself, to deal with whatever fear, anxiety, frustration, feel the emotion, and then see that as a signal to activate what I call a reset practice.
Yeah. And that's, and I know that's something that's really, really helpful to a lot of people with regard to how they approach challenging times or overwhelm or anxiety and things like that. And the nature of this show is helping to build the tools to deal with fear in its variety of forms. And so those reset moments are really important. And it sounds like, so you learned about those tools, I guess, even before you developed it into something of a framework. You learned and used those tools. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. I just didn't know that I did this. So, like, it was interesting because when the pandemic came around, as a public speaker, my income went from whatever it was to zero. My calendar was completely wiped clean. And I thought, well, okay, now what? And we've all had many of those now what moments. But so that's really a time for me to engage in this reset practice. So I stepped back so that I could get perspective and look at the different options and getting perspective. That's sort of the number 2 step. Mm-hmm. And then number 3 is, okay, let's realign around the next best step.
Yeah.
So not getting too overwhelmed with 10 steps ahead, especially at the time of the pandemic. We didn't know how long it was going to be, right? So sometimes we get so caught up in the future that realignment was just around the best next step. And by doing that, I realized, hey, I could teach this to others because they need this at this time. And that's how I sort of landed on, okay, well, how can I communicate this? Because this is my process and my practice, and I just do it. It's instinctive.
Yeah. I want to get into this reset moments because this is such an important and simple concept, and I do want to talk a little bit more about your story and how you got to this, because it is a powerful, you have a powerful story arc, and but this reset moments practice, can you describe those 3 things again and kind of go into a little bit more detail?
Sure. So the first one is to step back, mm-hmm. because it's our tendency to get lost in the detail, to get caught up in the worry or the biases and the way we've always done things and the way we've always looked at things. So the first step has to be to step back away from it, to be able to get some objectivity, to detach a little bit from the emotion.
Gotcha. Okay. And what kind of tools do you have to detach from the emotion? Because I know I have a hard time with that. I know a lot of people have a hard time not taking things maybe personally and really, really attaching to it. So our brains are kind of going in every different direction. How do we take a step back from all of those things that are overwhelming us and really just focus on, detaching?
Right. It's not easy. First of all, I know that it's 3 simple steps. That doesn't make it easy. It just makes it, simple. And that's the most important thing, is first to practice awareness. Mm-hmm. Right? So that first step in stepping back is practicing awareness. Recognize that what is it that you're feeling? Name that emotion. That's one way to step back, is to name the emotion. What am I feeling? And what's creating that feeling? What meaning am I giving this circumstance? Right? So it can come about from different questions that we can ask ourselves. What medium I give this helps me to get clear. Oh, I'm taking it that person is disrespecting me. Is that true? Right? That's how I can then get perspective, is then I can ask another question. But it could also be just reconnecting to what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. So connecting to a higher purpose can also be a really good grounding nature to say, okay, maybe this doesn't matter when I step back and look at what is it that I'm looking to achieve here. And that in itself has helped me through some very, very challenging times where I could really get caught up in my ego. And so like a divorce situation that I had many years ago. And my kids were 1 and 3 at the time. So I was like, I have to put my kids first. I have to think about, what do I want for my kids? What example am I setting? And I know that seems like a lot in the moment, but once you practice it more often, it actually comes up really quickly, where you just stop yourself before it comes out of your mouth. The first time you hear it come out of your mouth and you're like, oh, that was bad, right? So, but you still notice it, and then you can catch it next time, before you actually say it. So, and then it's just a thought in the bubble, and then you can pop the bubble,
I love it. I love popping the bubble. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that, because it's, you what I'm hearing there is, that detachment, or that stepping back, comes from awareness and curiosity. Like, finding that awareness and then just getting curious about it. And I love that question. That's the second time it's come up in the last 2 interviews I've had, is that true? I love that question.
Well, that's actually, I always get her name mixed up. Byron Katie's work, where she says, is that true? And then we have to ask it multiple times. If you take any question and you ask it multiple times, that leads us into like step 2, which is get perspective. That helps us not only to step back, but it helps us to see things for what they are, not worse than they are, not better than they are. So if we said, is that true? And then we said, is that really true? Yeah. And she talks about asking that 4 times. That helps us to really think about it. And I use that with my mentor's work, Steve Linder. I learned this from him, that it's, what does that mean? What else could that mean? And what else could that mean? And I realized that I've been doing that almost my whole life to reframe things.
Yeah.
And it works.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so powerful, because it's that curiosity aspect. When you ask the quality questions, I've found that it takes you out of your emotions. Like, it's the emotional, the taking it personally aspect. And this is great too. I mean, I've even hearing in, like, when conversations with other people, instead of going on the attack, like, pushing down, it's just like, asking questions to those, to people that you might be debating with, or having a heated conversation with, can really tone it down too. That includes your mind. It sounds like that's the case anyway.
Totally. You can't be, I like the way you just said that. That simple question, you can't be curious, and it's almost like they say you can't be happy and sad at the same time. So you can't be curious and angry, or curious and any of these other, right? Once you're curious, your whole attitude, your expectations, your priorities, everything changes. I say that when we shift our perspective, everything goes with it.
Yeah.
Like a domino effect.
Right. I love that. So so taking a step back, detaching through awareness and curiosity, getting perspective, and then the dominoes start to fall. So what is the final step of that reset moment?
And then realign.
Realign. Okay.
Right? So let's take that meaning. If I said, my first thought with the bubble was, let's say my son does something to irritate me. He doesn't take out the trash. And I think this is an act of defiance, right? It doesn't have to be something major. It can be these little things that annoy us, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's an act of defiance. And I have to ask myself, okay, what else could this mean? And what else could this mean? And it doesn't do our relationship any good if I stay in that place. So, and I don't always do it in the moment. It may take me a day or two to reframe that, but realizing that I'm heading down a path that's not productive for us in our relationship, then I can say, okay, what else could this mean? Okay, it's his senior year. He's got his energy and attention in lots of different places, and he literally forgot that maybe if he remembered to do it, he would do it, and that it wasn't intentional. let's give him the benefit of the doubt and let's just remind him, right? So I can choose what else could this mean? I can choose the one that's most productive for me so that I don't get emotional, and also for my interaction and conversations with him. So if I'm in this curious place of, I wonder what's going on with him that he's forgetting to do this.
Yeah.
How can we make it so that it's easier for both of us? That place of curiosity is going to come to a solution versus create more of a conflict.
Gotcha. So is that kind of practicing empathy or compassion with another person to just see what that is, or with yourself, or is that kind of where that's going with that kind of curiosity?
I guess so. I mean, I think we all use whatever language we're used to using. Like for me, it's finding perspective. Mm-hmm. I used to be dubbed the queen of perspective and the queen of reframing. Yeah. Like literally, I couldn't stop myself from reframing a situation to something positive from something that was, or something productive that was unproductive.
Right. Yeah. So you haven't always been, I mean, so you kind of going back to your experiences, you had this early experience in college where, your father passed away unexpectedly, and it kind of shaped how those reset moments started in your life. But you haven't always been, like, within your building your businesses and things like that, you haven't always been necessarily the focusologist. You've kind of learned that over time. So can you walk us through what got you from being in Europe to starting your business and selling it, and what did that look like?
Sure. But that focus is a common theme for me, right? And that did start with my dad. Gotcha. But yeah, so I went to Europe. I was actually an accounting and finance major, but I didn't really resonate with that, and loved technology because I like to make things better and work towards more productive outcomes, spend more time working on and thinking about more important things so that we could automate the other things. And so technology just took off for me. Like, I just loved it. It was just fun to create these solutions. And so, I don't know, one thing led to another, and I had the opportunity to start my own business with some other people. They all dropped out, and then I was like, well, I'm doing this. I'm already here. Right. So, so I started, and it was just also really good timing for technology.
Yeah.
And I was in Switzerland at the time, so maybe I had an edge that I was an American, and, Americans were seen as sort of, Silicon Valley. So even though I wasn't from Silicon Valley, just because I was American, I think I was sort of, took on that feeling for people.
Yeah. What was this around 2001, the tech boom kind of stuff that was happening, or was it later? Or
it was actually, I started my own company. When was